Well, in case you haven't heard yet, Jesus lived and died about 2,000 years ago. He lived around Galilee and Judea. He died in Jerusalem on a Roman cross. Hopefully, so far, so good. But do you ever wonder, really, what does that have to do with me? Why does it matter that a Jewish man was brutally executed all those years ago? And the answer lies in who we are and in who Jesus is. So first, who are we? We are those who follow the crowd. We tend to want to fit in, to be acceptable, to be loved by others, to be part of a group. If you can remember your school days or think about school, it might be a current reality for you. Were you part or are you part of the in crowd? Do you have lots of friends around you? Or do you tend to be a loner? Never a nice feeling, is it, being on the outside? And I think that's because as human beings we are made for relationship. And so sometimes that means that we'll tend to think as a group. We'll follow the crowd. We're inherently social creatures. None of us really like to be completely out on our own. And so sometimes our tendency to follow the crowd, to want to fit in, is a good thing. But sometimes it leads to a perverse outcome. Perverse. A deliberate, stubborn desire to behave in a way that's unreasonable. Like the toddler who insists it's a good idea to run across a busy road. Or like a blind person leading a blind person along the cliff edge. Or the apprentice teaching the master how it really ought to be done. Well, in the start of chapter 23, Jesus has been arrested and he's brought before Pilate, the Roman governor. I want you to picture this. Jesus has come to Jerusalem, the city where the Roman governor is ruling, and his own people, the Jewish people, have had him arrested and dragged before Pilate. And the assembly accuses him. They accuse him of perverting our nation, sending God's people, his chosen holy ones, the nation of Israel, in a perverse direction. But Pilate, the Roman governor, after carefully questioning Jesus, finds him to be innocent of all charges under Roman law. And so, being a just man, Pilate wants to release the innocent man. But in verse 18, all the people there shouted, "Away with this fellow, release Barabbas for us." Barabbas, a man imprisoned for an insurrection, a rebellion in the city. Barabbas, a murderer. The people are demanding a perverse decision from the governor. They're demanding that an innocent man be punished and a guilty man go free. A perverse decision indeed. So Pilate found him innocent, and then in verse 47, towards the end of this account, the centurion, the Roman military commander, a man of power and prestige, he also stands at the cross and he praises God and he says, certainly this man was innocent. So the crowd demands that an innocent man be punished, but why did they make this perverse decision? Well, because they failed to see who Jesus really is. And so that brings us to our second point. Who is Jesus? Pilate gives in to the people. He sends Jesus to his death to die on a Roman cross, a common and yet brutal punishment for the very worst of criminals, a disgraceful death for anyone, let alone an innocent man. But as Jesus goes to be executed, we see that he is so deeply compassionate. Think back to our reading when we saw Simon of Cyrene being forced to carry Jesus' heavy wooden cross, following along behind Jesus. And the mourners begin wailing, beating their chests in a display of grief, because they know what's coming. They know that Jesus is walking to his death, to his brutal, painful and awful execution. He does this willingly, even though he's innocent. But strangely, he tells the women who are mourning that they shouldn't weep for him. Can you imagine that? In this awful time of anticipation, he knows what is coming. You'd think that he would be terrified, that he'd be thinking only of himself, and yet such is his compassion for the problems faced by all of humanity that he tells these women, don't weep for me. Don't weep for me, weep for yourselves. The day will come, says Jesus, when these women will wish that they had never been born. They will wish that they had never given birth to their children. They will wish that the mountains would fall on them and wipe them out. Jesus, in his compassion, as he goes to his own death, is warning them of a judgment that's coming, something more awful than they can imagine. And so he's a willing sacrifice, willingly going to his death. A willing sacrifice for you and for me. As Jesus is being crucified, as he's hanging there on the cross, remember those two men, the two criminals, being crucified on either side of him. And the crowd mocks Jesus, saying, "Save yourself, King of the Jews." But the two men on either side of him react differently. One follows the crowd, mocking Jesus, saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other man refuses to follow the crowd in their perversion of justice and truth. Like Pilate, like the centurion, this man knows that Jesus is innocent, and he rebukes the other man. He says to the other criminal, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." And then we have one of the most profound conversations in the whole of the Bible. The man says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replies, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." It's a bit hard, isn't it, to get our heads around just how extraordinary this is. I love the way that preacher Alistair Begg imagines this moment when the criminal, has died and he arrives at the gates of heaven. Alistair imagines a conversation between the angel at the gate of heaven and the criminal. And he imagines the angel saying, "Why should you come in? Have you lived a good life?" "Well, no." "Have you kept the 10 Commandments?" "No." "Did you go to synagogue or church every week and give time and money to the church faithfully?" "Never." "Well, why should you be allowed in? On what basis do you think you can come into God's presence?" "The man on the middle cross said I could come." The man on the middle cross said I could come. When it comes to us, we ourselves cannot come into God's presence because of our good works, or our faithful lives, or our character, or our perseverance. We all know that we even fall short of our own standards, let alone God's standards for us. Like the crowd in Jerusalem that day, we too choose what is perverse. We choose to walk away from God, to live life on our own terms. We choose to deny our own guilt. We like to think that we can be good enough or do enough to earn our way into heaven. But if it was possible for anyone to do enough to be acceptable to God, how then do we make sense of the thief on the cross? He lived a terrible life, but he admitted his sin. He turned to Jesus, asking that Jesus remember him. And Jesus' promise was that he would be in paradise with him that day. That's all. It's that simple. Jesus, the innocent man, takes the penalty that we deserve. It's the greatest exchange that you could ever imagine. Such is his compassion, such is his love and mercy and kindness to us, that Jesus, the innocent man, God in flesh, would take the sin of all who trust in him, taking what we deserve so that we get what he deserves. So what is your decision today? Will you go along with the crowd? Perhaps it's easier just to fit in, to go with the majority who call Jesus foolish for imagining that he really is the king of not only the Jews but the whole universe. Or will you choose to be reconciled to God through Jesus, both in this life and for all eternity? Will you rightly declare him to be an innocent man and, like the thief on the cross, simply ask that he remember you when he comes into his kingdom? Not for your good works, but because you trust in him. Colossians chapter 1, verse 19 to 23 tells us that God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in Jesus, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behaviour, but now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation, if you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. Friends, take hold of that good news today, the good news that Jesus, through his body broken on the cross for us, has reconciled us to God if we trust in him. And if you've already taken hold of that promise, then rejoice and hold on firmly, continuing in your faith, established and firm, and not moving from the hope held out in the gospel. Amen. We are going to continue now in a time of prayer.